Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 330. The Daily News has some new information out today about how the prosecutors attempted to access sealed documents from the Sarah Ransome civil litigation in 2018 and were denied by a federal judge. Now, during the hearing on Tuesday, they sort of brought this up and they talked about this a little bit. They were talking about two civil cases, and this was one of them. And Mr. Mueller, the lawyer for Elaine Maxwell, was very coy about things and wasn't very forthcoming with information, etc., etc. But it looks like the Daily News has some new information here, or at least some context to add to the story. So let's jump into this article by the Daily News and see what's what. The author of this article is Stephen Rex Brown. Headline: Prosecutors were denied sealed records of Jeffrey Epstein survivor, source says. Sounds pretty ominous, huh? Let's see what the story has to say about it. Manhattan federal prosecutors investigating Jeffrey Epstein and his alleged madam, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag, and bipedal serpent, Elaine Maxwell, were denied access last year to records in a civil lawsuit brought by accuser Sarah Ransome, a source told the New York Daily News. That's pretty interesting. Don't you think that if you were the judge that had this ruling, that you would have asked to see what sort of evidence they had to lead them to want to have access to these other sealed documents? Do you think that the judge would want to see all of that, and there'd be a bit of coordination between prosecution and the judge's office? But no, it looks like the judge in 2018 told the prosecutors and investigators to pound sand, that they're not going to get access to these sealed files in the Sarah Ransome case. The ruling by Manhattan federal judge John Coltle ordering the records remain under seal was hinted at during a hearing Tuesday before the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. And the judge was kind of confused. He was like, wouldn't both of these cases, civil and criminal, be under our purview here at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals anyway? Why wouldn't we have all of this information? And remember, I was talking to you guys about that a little bit in the episode I did about the recap episode from the trial. And it was, kind of an interesting back and forth between Mueller and the judges over this so-called sealed information, I guess you would say, or information that he couldn't talk about in open court. But it was a very interesting back and forth. So it's nice to see that the New York Daily News is adding some context here, right? Because again, the more context we have, the better off we all are, and the easier it is for us to see the big picture then. We don't want half the story. We don't want just a little bit of the story. We want the whole entire thing. The decision, which came before Epstein's arrest, was a lucky break for Maxwell and his other alleged enablers. So this decision was rendered before Epstein's arrest. So, again, before his second arrest, and that would mean that, who knows, was he still being protected? Did he still have some sway? Did he still have some homies lingering about? Because I don't believe that he was fully burned as an asset until the second arrest. Once the second arrest came down the pipe, I think that was it for his career as an asset for insert your favorite intelligence organization here. So prior to that, though, we all know he was operating within a different set of guidelines than the rest of us. We all know that he had a different tier of justice that he was held accountable in than the rest of us would be. So why wouldn't he be getting protected still in 2018? The decision which came before Epstein's arrest was a lucky break for Maxwell and his other alleged enablers, Leslie Groff and Sarah Kellen. All were named as defendants in Ransome's case, which was settled in December 2018 after nearly 2 years of litigation. So they tried to get access to the sealed documents from this civil case. The prosecutors did before Epstein's arrest, and they were denied by Judge Kotel. Now, it doesn't really go into why the judge denied that decision. I'm sure that we could take a look and probably find a little bit more information on that, and I probably will be going to take a look at that decision and the brief that was put out after the decision, etc., to try and get a better idea of why the judge would not grant access to the prosecutors. Now, it's not like some random person was asking for access to these files. These are the prosecutors who were asking for this access, and Judge Kotel denied that access. And I'm wondering what the legal decision behind that is. Ransome accused Kellen in the suit of maintaining Epstein's sex schedule. Well, yeah, we know that Sarah Kellen Vickers is somehow not in jail right now, but we all know that her role was as a lieutenant in a leadership capacity, and she was very responsible for carrying out orders given to her by Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. That's how it works, right? In a criminal enterprise. You're a lieutenant, well, you have people above you. You have the capo above you. You have the boss above you, obviously. You have the underboss above you. You have the consigliere above you. So, this is how these enterprises work, these criminal enterprises, that they are all connected with their crimes. And Sarah Kellen Vickers, not only was she guilty of facilitating these crimes, allegedly she also took part in the abuse sometimes. So she's on a different tier entirely, in my opinion. She's just, right up there with Elaine Maxwell as far as penalties she's looking at. Because she was not just facilitating this, she wasn't just taking notes. And if the allegations are true about what Sarah Kellen Vickers was involved in, well, she is really in jeopardy of spending a good chunk of the rest of her life in prison, if this case is truly being investigated the way it should be. Maxwell, Ransome charged, was for decades the highest-ranking employee of the defendant's sex trafficking venture and enterprise. Yeah, she was the co-boss, right? She was the head honcho when Jeffrey wasn't around. She spoke with Jeffrey's voice. Now, Jeffrey Epstein might have been the figurehead, and what they call that in the mafia is the street boss. But sometimes what you see on the street isn't really what's going on behind the scenes. And this is a situation like that, in my opinion. I've always said it. I don't think Jeffrey Epstein was that smart of a dude. I don't think he was this criminal mastermind. And I think that Elaine Maxwell definitely provided a lot of the operational expertise in this sex trafficking enterprise. She was more than a procurer. She was more than a smiling face. And she most certainly was more than a socialite. The South African-born Ransome said Epstein's enablers lured her into his depraved operation around 2007 with the promise that he would use his influence to get her admitted into the Fashion Institute of Technology. And why would she not think that he could do that? Hell, he already had a board seat at the New York Academy of Art. He was running around with all of these models, running around with Les Wexner. And if you're friends with Stuart Pavar and Eileen Guggenheim and John Brockman and all of these other scoundrel-ass people, well, why wouldn't a girl like Sarah Ransome think that you could help facilitate their career, that you could help them move into the next level? Of course that's what people think, and that is exactly why Jeffrey Epstein was so successful using this strategy. It was the carrot in front of the horse type deal, right? Keep going, keep doing what I want you to do, and eventually you'll get where you're going. I'll give you this treat, and the treat never comes. Just more hard work, just more despair, just more abuse. The decision by Kodal has implications for Maxwell's fight against 2 perjury charges stemming from the depositions in a separate case brought by Epstein survivor Virginia Roberts. Prosecutors say Maxwell lied about her knowledge of Epstein's stash of sex toys and abuse of underage girls in 2 depositions in 2016 for the Roberts case. A different judge granted the feds access to the Roberts case file, including the 2 depositions in April 2019. So what we have here is a case of one judge not granting access, while another judge did grant access. So what we have here is a kind of a situation of like a real conundrum, right? You got one judge rendering one decision, another judge rendering another decision. So there's really not precedent to go on here. And I mean, I could see why. Look, when you look at all of this stuff wrapped together that was dropped in the lap of the appeals court, I can see why they had to take some time to look at all of these factors and to come to render a decision, because there's a lot going on here. There is a whole lot going on here. We think there's no precedent for how the government obtained Miss Maxwell's depositions, Maxwell's attorney Adam Mueller told the Second Circuit Court on Tuesday. And that, you know what? He has a strong argument, right? If the 2 judges had those different rulings, he can definitely point to that and say, look, there's no precedent here. 2 judges had 2 separate rulings, so I guess it'll be up to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals to clean this mess up, right? To tidy this all up. That's their job. As the higher court, the Court of Appeals, it is definitely their job to come in and clean up the spilt milk. The British socialite, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag, and bipedal serpent was also deposed in the ransom case, according to the source, but it remains under wraps. Of course it does. You know, all of these people like Elaine Maxwell, they get all of their shit under wraps, right? That never sees the light of day for most part. And if it wasn't for all of you going crazy all the time over this case, it would probably be the same situation here. But now, since things have, let us say, changed a bit in this case, well, who knows? Perhaps the deposition and the information in the ransom case that was in that deposition will eventually come to light as well. Assistant U.S. Attorney Laura Pomerantz hinted in the hearing that prosecutors wanted to keep details about the unusual requests to judges under wraps as much as possible. An investigation into Epstein's sex trafficking operation is ongoing. So, of course, they're doing their due diligence, right? They want to keep as much information under wraps as possible, like we discussed previously. They want to make sure, the federal government, that when they come down, it's their whole entire boot heel coming down on your throat. They don't want to give you time to move out of the way. They don't want to just crush your jaw. No, they're looking for a fatality. And that's what we're going to see here for sure, especially considering how much this case has grown, according to the prosecutors even, how this is an ongoing investigation. What more could they possibly be investigating besides other co-conspirators? That could create problems alerting targets of the government's investigation to the scope of the investigation, as well as to investigative techniques, she said. So basically what she's saying is, A, they don't want to alert anybody who might be indicted who might be a target in this case. They don't want to give them the heads up so that they can get out of Dodge, right? So that they can hide out or disappear or whatever it might be. They also don't want to give up the scope of the investigation. That means how large it is, because that can alert people as well. I mean, if you're using your subpoena power to go after people like Leon Black and Glenn Dubin, et cetera, as far as criminally, well, you don't want to let on, and you don't want other people to know that, right? So they keep that stuff really close to the vest, and that's definitely not something they want to share with the defense if they can avoid that at all. They don't want to give them anything, right? They want to make sure that they have the surprise on their side. Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to charges of lying under oath, as well as grooming underage women for Epstein's abuse. She is locked up at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Attorneys for Maxwell, Groff, and Ransome either did not respond to inquiries or declined comment. Epstein hanged himself, allegedly, in a cell while awaiting trial for sex trafficking in August 2019, 5 months after the feds obtained the records in the Roberts case. So none of the lawyers wanted to talk or have a comment when the Daily News reached out to them. Maxwell's lawyers, Leslie Groff's lawyers, or Sarah Ransome's lawyers. So I can only imagine what is in that deposition as well, right? I'm sure a whole bunch of other sordid, disgusting, gross, perverse nonsense. These people were truly sick. And the ritual abuse, and that's what it was, right? These people were being ritually abused on a regular basis by these disgusting people, went on for so long. And so many people who were around Jeffrey Epstein and this criminal enterprise who say they don't know what was going on or they have no idea. I don't know how they look themselves in the mirror. I don't know how they sleep at night, because holy cow. What sort of soulless scumbag do you have to be to not say anything about what was going on at Jeffrey Epstein's house? The Daily News exclusively reported Tuesday on outreach by attorneys for Epstein survivors to Manhattan federal prosecutors in 2016. The attorneys, sources said, unsuccessfully pitched the Southern District of New York on an investigation of Epstein and Maxwell. Those discussions will likely be probed in the criminal case against Maxwell. Her attorneys have written she was the victim of a perjury trap that resulted in charges against her. Well, they can try that strategy, but it's not going to work, right? Again, what did I tell you about technicalities? It's never going to be. Be ready for it, folks. You're not going to hear Elaine Maxwell talk about her innocence here. We're going to hear a bunch of technicalities. They're going to try and navigate a bunch of loopholes, and it's going to be up to the prosecution to make sure that that does not occur. Because we have seen way too much limp-wristed work from prosecutors throughout the years on this case. So now it's time for these prosecutors to have some backbone. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I will be back in the morning.